Injustice affects one's descendants. Geronda. When I left to join the monastery, I was treated unfairly by my family. Should I ask for what legally belongs to me? No, that's not the right thing to do. I fear that something bad may happen to them as a result of this. Now, this is what I call pure Philodimo. If I were you, I would tell them, I want nothing for myself, but I would like you to give my share, what is rightfully mine, to the poor with your own hands, starting with our poor relatives. I am asking this because I don't want the wrath of God to fall on your children. Likewise, sometimes a father may give away his fortune for the good of his soul, by creating a charitable institution, for example, and leave nothing to his own child. The grandparents in a family may have done something wrong and still have a good life without consequences, but then their children or grandchildren may suffer. They might get sick and be forced to spend on doctors the money that was made unjustly. In this way, they will pay their grandparents' debts. A family I once knew went through many difficulties. First, the head of the family got very sick, suffered greatly, and after being bedridden for a few years, passed away. Then his wife died, and later his children, one after the other. His fifth and last child passed away recently. Even though they had been a very rich family, they lost everything and ended up being poor, because they had to sell their property for almost nothing in order to pay the doctor's bills and all the other expenses. I used to wonder why all these horrible things, sickness and accidents, were happening to them. I happened to know some members of this family, and it did not seem to me that it was the good kind of trial, the kind that God sends to those he favors. Rather, it was obvious that God's spiritual laws were being put into effect. I wanted to be certain, and so I tried to find out more about the family from reliable sources, some old folks who lived in the same town. I found out that the man had inherited a certain fortune from his father, which he increased by doing all sorts of wrong things. So if a widow, say, were to ask him for a loan to pay for her daughter's wedding and promise to return the money once she had harvested the crops, he would ask instead for a piece of the land she owned. And if she was in great need, she would sell him the land for the price he set. Someone else would ask him for a loan to pay the bank and promise to repay him after the cotton harvest. He would ask for the poor fellow's land and would get it for almost nothing, as the farmer was afraid that the bank would come after him. When someone else asked him for a small loan to pay the doctors, he would go after his cow and buy it for pennies. This is how he made his fortune. The pain he caused to all those poor people was returned not only to him and his wife, but also to his children. So the spiritual laws came into effect, causing them to suffer the very same things that the father's actions had caused. In order to pay all their medical expenses and everything else, they had to sell their land for almost nothing, and after becoming poor, they left this life for good, one after the other. God, of course, with his love and sense of justice, will judge them accordingly. Those who had been harmed by the man, all the poor folk who had been forced to sell their belongings to pay off the bank and doctors and so forth, all those people will be rewarded for the injustices they had to go through. And of course, the unjust will also pay their dues.